Welcome to the podcast today. Welcome to Kole and Pey. Welcome to the podcast where we say silly things. Welcome to the podcast. It's us. Have fun and let it go. Welcome to the podcast with Kole and Pey.
That high note, I'm impressed.
No.
Kole and Pey! Welcome to the podcast.
How's your day been going, Kole?
It's been going well until you showed me that video and I started crying. That was fun.
Yeah, we just watched the Shane Koizikin To This Day video. If you haven't seen it, it's great.
You need to.
It's old.
I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, it's very, very, very good. But yeah, we're just kind of hanging out. We're just chilling. I'm pulling up some notes so that we can go off of. Last podcast video, Raquel left a cool comment about talking about inspirations, and I think that'd be a good place to start. Like, how do you use inspiration, Kole, in what you do? How far does it take you? You know, like, how much does it help?
I think inspirations, especially in like YouTube when you're creating things, like I think in any art form, is used a lot. The problem is I'm always scared to like, at what point is it like yoinking completely or using it to inspire, which I think there's a fine line, and I think as long as you make it your own, then you can. But I always get worried about that for me because I don't want to like make it seem like I'm yoinking, but I do tend to cling to others.
You want to,
you know.
You went a different direction than I was expecting.
Oh,
I
don't know what you're
like feeling inspired. No, but I like that. So I was thinking like of inspiration as kind of no. I think the way you used it actually makes more sense of like people that we emulate and we want to be like, and people that inspire us to do what we're doing. Very obviously, we both watch Ludwig, but like if you were to name like top 3 inspirations, just people that like. Because I'm gonna name like musicians or comedians or stuff like that. Who are your like top 3 inspirations? People that made you go like, what I'm doing is interesting, and I would like to continue doing it, and this is something I feel passionate about.
Well, man, inspirations. You go first. I'll go after.
Okay, yeah. So I have some because I've thought about this a lot, right?
Okay, yeah.
My biggest inspiration, bar none, is Childish Gambino, Donald Glover. So Donald Glover's like timeline of what he did is he started working on YouTube, which many people don't know. He was part of a comedy troupe named Derek Comedy that did skit comedy. Yeah, skit comedy, bit comedy.
I think skit. I think is usually what they say. Skit comedy.
Okay, skit comedy. It just sounded weird when I said it. Yeah. But it was this great comedy group during like kind of like OG YouTube days, right? And he was amazing. And then he landed a job trying to write, and he ended up writing for a show called 30 Rock with Tina Fey. He killed it on 30 Rock, and then CBS came along saying, "Hey, we're going to start a new show. Are you interested in working for us?" And Donald Glover was like, "Yeah, all right." And then they're like, "We're looking for people to fill this role. You might fit. Do you want to check it out?" So he auditioned for the role Troy, right? He gets the role and he kills it for years and eventually leaves the show, right? So at this point, he's acted. He's a comedy writer. Before he left the show, he started his rap career as Childish Gambino, and he was doing stand-up comedy, which you've seen, like The Special Weirdo, which at this point, he's like a glorified like Renaissance man, right? He's doing all these different mediums. He's rapping, and then he leaves Community, and he decides, oh, I'm going to start releasing music where I'm singing, not just rapping, and starts releasing singing music as a rapper. And there's a huge tonal shift, and it's just like something that I find so inspiring about Childish Gambino is he just does what he wants to, right? Things he's passionate about, things he's interested in, and he makes it work. And it's just really cool to see, especially the degree in which he takes it, right? We've all seen This Is America, right? We've all seen like a couple of these things that blew up, but he has a show called Atlanta that he stars in and writes for and occasionally directs, and it's one of my favorite shows of all time. So this kind of multifaceted music, because I want to do music, but I also want to make movies. I want to write. I want to be a YouTuber, right? Like I want to do stuff on YouTube. I think that that's part of what makes YouTube so fun is it's a perfect mix of that. Like I'm writing my own content, I'm performing my own music, I'm doing the visuals too with my camera and everything like that. It's a cool mix of all these passions. But if I had to like name like three big inspirations, the first three that come to mind are Donald Glover, Bo Burnham, and probably John Mulaney. I don't know why those are the three that come to mind, but like
Wait, who's John Mulaney?
John Mulaney is a stand-up comic who has like 3 Netflix specials that are great. He also did that show called Big Mouth, which is the animated Netflix show about puberty that's amazing and is really, really great. And
I thought you were going to say Dickie, because Dickie kind of did the same thing.
I like Dickie. I don't see him as an inspiration.
Yeah.
I think that he's a really good person to emulate. But for some reason, there's like a certain degree of like, I actually think he made a lot of mistakes. Like he didn't break away from his comedy music, I think, fast enough if he wanted to be taken serious. He ran with the trope, I think, a little bit too long. Yeah. And that resulted in this scenario where it was like he got kind of pigeonholed. So there's a certain degree of like he had to make an entire show to kind of sell this point of he wants to be taken as like a serious artist. And even then, it's still like not being totally accepted by people. So I don't know. I love Lil Dicky, but I think John Mulaney, the way John Mulaney does stuff is very cool. I also love John Mulaney's transparency in what he does. Like he just is very open about his past, right? Because he had an issue with drinking, and he was like a party guy who did cocaine, and he's like, yeah, I did cocaine. No one would have expected that. None of you expected that. I used to do cocaine, and stuff like that. And it's like, back when he was in college, and he has a lot of good stories that are shocking and hilarious, and he's just also an expert at his craft, I think. Plus, he just resonates with me. Those are like 3 people that I feel very heavily inspired by. What about you? Have you landed on anyone?
Yeah, who did I have? Well, I mean, Ludwig is inspiring, but I don't want to do what Ludwig's doing. I want to do my own thing. Oh, Prezzo, the editor. Mm-hmm. I like the concept of him where he just started doing it, and then he put I think a lot of effort into his stuff for the most part, and it showed. And so then now he's up and doing cold ones with what's
Anything for Views and the other guy. Who's really famous. I forgot his name. But
I can't remember his name either. But yeah, so Prezzo, I think, as far as editing is concerned, I think he's a pretty big inspiration to me because I think he did it the organic way of just like, starting from, editing for Clint Stevens, going through that grind, and then like evolving into this editor. And I don't know his background. I don't know if he was, and his Twitter's crazy. I mean, I don't know if I want to be crazy on Twitter like that, but I think that, especially if he didn't go to school for it, which I feel like he didn't, but maybe he did go to school for editing or something like that. I'm not really sure. But I like that. Go ahead, yeah.
Someone that we've both been watching a lot lately is Dream, the Minecraft YouTuber. And I feel like he's a good inspiration.
I didn't know about Dream.
Dream is awesome. Dream is super cool. And we watched like an entire video together the other night. And he's like, I'm like, do you want to watch this 40-minute long video with me? And he's like, no, but I will. And he's like, I'm down. And we watched it all, and it was like great. It was amazing. So something that Dream did very well is he's not only good at what he does with execution, but he also found a very original idea that was very interesting and ran with it and added stakes. And it's a perfect example of like he's succeeding. Every reason he's succeeding makes sense. Like it makes sense that Dream is one of the biggest YouTubers right now. He's blowing up. I also think Mr. Beast is a little bit like that, where like I'm not especially into what Mr. Beast does, but he is original and he is clever, and he kind of trailblazed in his own way to add something unique to the YouTube community. And honestly, I think it's actually kind of a really wholesome thing to do. It gives him a lot of agency to give money away in very cool ways. Like the planting of a billion trees thing was like super, super cool. I think that it's cool to see people using their platform in that way, but also it's cool to see people succeeding because they're coming up with something original, which is what I actually think you're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Well, that's my hope. Well, it's not completely original, so like I'll throw out my inspirations, I guess, with what I'm doing. One of my inspirations is this guy. I think there's a lot of YouTubers that do VR chat stories. I think when VR chat was popping, there was like people were meeting people a lot, so there were like people were telling these stories, and I think that was one of my like initial inspirations, but also like the storytime edit thing kind of fell in my lap because like
Yeah.
Ludwig told a story and I just edited it and I did I did the best I could. And then also Monster Tipper is an inspiration. I mean, so like he was, I guess, my original inspiration on my storytime edits as well, because I was like, this is really cool, and I think I put my own style on it. I have a different style than he does or whatever, but he was definitely an inspiration to me, editing wise as well, which I forgot. I should definitely mention that. I forgot what I was saying, but yeah,
You were talking about what you're doing. I think what you're doing. There's this common like statement and like story like so I'm working on a book, like a fiction fun book. I like the idea of writing, and it's one of those things where I like storytelling and blah 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 blah. But my point being, in writing, there's this idea that nothing's original to a certain degree. You take an idea that's been like the hero's journey is a classic archetype of a story, right? And so many stories fit into that category. But then you take that and you add something unique, and then you do it well, right? And because I don't know, the best example I can think of is like we share 96.6 something percent or something around there of the same DNA with a banana, right? But that 4% difference is what makes us a human and not a banana. And there's so much range within, like if you look at how much genetic code we share amongst humans, like there's so much variation in people with the slightest of differences. I think that there's a lot of, everyone's inspired, everyone's always drawing from people and trying to add something unique, something that will differentiate what they're doing rather than falling into the same kind of oversaturated group of content creators.
I also like going back to Dream. I like the way he does sound design or like music, like puts music in the background, and Ludwig also does a really good job of that. That's where my next growth. So much funny because someone wrote a book in a comment in one of my recent videos. Or no, it was, which video was it? I forget.
It was the Dan Corona video, and it was talking about the music used in the Dan Corona video.
It was like a book, and he was completely right, and that's like my next like avenue of pursuing is gaining this collection of non-copyright music, which is not easy to do, and then using it, like integrating that into a good way of like not only telling the story but also using music to enhance the story and make it the viewer feel a certain way. I think that's a big.
What's funny is I just went through this working on the movie I did, right? So back in, I guess, the end of last year, I got hired to write music for a low budget indie film. So it's a feature length film. It was over an hour and a half. And
it's on Amazon.
And yeah, it's on Amazon. I can plug that. I'm planning on actually doing a video about it at some point. But I learned a lot from that process, and it's very much fills the same role of like music and movies fits this very weird thing where what you are doing is amplifying emotion, right? And you're trying to fit into a position where you're not too invasive, right? And not overbearing, because there's other things people are supposed to be focusing on, especially in certain scenes, and it's very tricky. And it's like very weird. It's a very, very cool thing. It's amazing how impactful music is. I'm sure you've seen this, but maybe you haven't. Some people will take horror scenes and just take out the music and just have the Foley stuff, and it's amazing because it's not nearly as scary or impactful.
Yeah.
Right. So things that are like normally terrifying are suddenly pretty.
Yeah, horror
pretty
films
good.
I feel like are really important in horror films. And like you were saying, like it's about enhancing but not overshadowing the story, and then like mixing it to where like the volumes are right, and that's a whole different thing. I'm working on all that. That's my next step. So take a look out. Cool. And let me know if you like it or whatever.
Yeah, and then we have a story. I did a story with you that should
I'm working on that right now
at some point, which is really cool. So that'll be really fun for people. I got lost in London. That's the
title, basically.
Yeah, it's the title.
It's gonna be how Pey the musician got lost in London. I think is what I'm setting on. Yeah,
you could. Yeah. I mean,
or it could just be how I. Yeah, I thought about using your name just because I don't know.
You do this thing where you do you first person, which is someone does that, and I don't know how I feel about it because
you think it's bad.
Well, no, there's this guy who does how I wrote this movie, right? And it's a channel that gathers clips of directors or writers from movies talking about how they made something, right? So the entire video is from the perspective of the person, but I always feel kind of lied to a little bit because they didn't write the title. So I think it's like more interesting in third person. where it's like how he, but I don't know.
How
It's
Pey.
up to viewer discretion. Yeah, how Pey or
I
how
just know
how
that
he got lost in London,
I feel like more
or
clickable
just
things.
getting lost in London, right?
That's true too. Yeah.
You know, like I think that's
Getting
like
lost
very
in London.
clickable too.
That could
I've
work too.
seen that a
Yeah.
lot.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Titles and thumbnails, and that's all. I'm
it's all
still
tricky. It's
yeah.
it's all you're good at
Algorithms.
it though. You
That's all
just
we
helped
talk
me
about.
with my thumbnail
Yeah.
from my most recent video for the
There's a
reaction video.
I just use Ludwig's formula. That's what if you ever watch that video, Ludwig says 3 main things in the title with the thing, and pretty simple formula.
It's a good strategy. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Hey, we brought this up, but we were thinking about doing a Q&A in the next podcast, or a like a quick fire questions. So we go through questions really quick, like simple answers, right? And we just like pump them out. So we might put a community tab or something of that nature, maybe something on Instagram. I don't know yet how we're going to do it, but we're accepting questions. If you guys are interested in that, you can even just leave them down in the comment section, and we'll gather them all, and then we can do like questions for Kole or questions for Pey. I think that would be a lot of fun. And it'd be a cool little segment for the podcast. So if you guys are interested in that, leave a comment asking whatever you'd be interested in hearing. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I agree. I think that's a good idea. You could tweet
on the top
hashtag.
Right, yeah.
Kole.
Wait, you just cut out for me.
I muted my mic. Whoops. KoleDaMan on Twitter. KoleDaMan on Twitter.
KoleDaMan. Yeah. Do you have KoleDaMan for everything, like Instagram?
No, some dude. So on Insta, some dude's name is KoleDaMan, and he posted he posted one picture. It's I mean his name is KoleDaMan. It's KoleDaMan.
DAMAN.
Yeah, KoleDaMan, but KoleDaMan.
Yeah, so, that's so funny.
Instagram. I'm KoleDaMan Twitch, I think, on Instagram, but I don't know.
Well, there's this YouTuber that we've been watching lately called Zark Flappy Sheep, but he just changed his name to Mango Milkshake, which is really confusing because if you search Mango Milkshake, he won't pop up yet. But he does animations, and he has one thing blowing up right now. But it's very funny because he was having huge issues with his name identity, and I watched like a couple live streams he did where he was trying to figure out what the fuck to name himself because he didn't like Zark Flappy Sheep, and he's had it for a while. And then now that he's blowing up, he had to like pull the trigger and actually rename it. So did you go through that phase of like having to figure out what your channel's name was?
I changed my name. So my name was it's always been KoleDaMan since I was a kid. Like my mom was like, "Oh yeah, you need to make a username for your email, right?" And so my email is just my first and last name with a dot middle at Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
But for my username, I was like, yeah, Kole. I guess I could link my last name.
Cousin to Barack.
Yeah. So yeah, that was like my first thing, and I think I tried KoleDaMan, and it was taken, so I did KoleDaMan, and then it stuck since.
Pretty badass. Let's be real.
I guess. I mean, whatever. Anyway, but so then I changed my name. So I went through another phase in college where I was like, I'm gonna be a YouTuber, right? And I was like, man, maybe I should rebrand myself. And they called me, I think I was Spanky on Melee or something, like, because you can only have 5 characters, and I was like, I mean, Spanky's kind of a funny name, right? So it was like your boy Spanky, BOI, because I wanted to be like unique enough to where I don't think it would get taken on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then like my intro was like, Spanky from the Little Rascals. It was like the welcome screen with, you don't know Little Rascals at all?
I know Little Rascals. I didn't know there was. I'm thinking South Park. Spanky the Magic Pooh.
I didn't. Oh, was his name Spanky? I thought the Magic Pooh was something else. Oh, there's the Towel. What's the Towel's name?
Towley.
Yeah, I didn't watch that show very much. That's funny though. Yeah, that was my Spanky. I thought it was a funny name, and I just kind of ran with it. And I still kind of kept the same thing, like the man or the boy, your boy, whatever. I don't know. Yeah. I went back to my roots though. I was like, you know what? I'm big KoleDaMan my whole life. I'm gonna stick with KoleDaMan. There's no point in changing it. So
I think it's a good name, and it also is funny because it follows the exact same formula as mine. Because I'm Pey the, right? So like Pey the musician, Pey the creator, Pey the, But originally I wasn't Pey the creator. At one point I went through a Pey Loveland thing where I was like trying to have like because I was like kind of singer-songwriter, and a lot of singer-songwriter people just do like a full name, and I didn't want to use my actual name. I wanted there to be like a little bit of a cushion, like because realistically you'll be able to find my actual name everywhere. Like I mean, there's no way to avoid that. But I did notice that like there's an artist I really like named Hobo Johnson, and it's like people who know him a little bit better call him Frank.
Hobo Johnson, I've heard that name.
Yeah. He did the peach scone video that went viral where he's smoking a cigarette in the backyard, and he's like kind of like rap. It's really like lo-fi-ish, but good. He's good. He's from Sacramento. I actually have met him a couple times and talked to him for a while, and I know some of his band members. and stuff like that. And then I know people part of the scene. But
quickly. So Pey the Musician. If you look up Pey the Musician on YouTube, it's like Pay the Musician, right? Which is kind of what you mentioned. Like it was like a pun, like a spin on like Pay the Musician, and it's also like kind of punny.
It wasn't intended to be that, but then I was like, it kind of works as a double for that. And then it's like subliminal, right? Pay me.
Anyway, so it's right, yeah, exactly. But you look it up, and it's like Pay the Musician or Convince Wife, and it's the first not Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption. I guess there was some mission where you either pay the musician or convince the wife of the musician. I guess
it's like it's a decision for evil or good.
Yeah. So I think that's hilarious. Every time I look it up, it autos to that. Anyway,
one day when I search Pey the
when you search Pey the Musician, it'll be you, baby. Let's go. Let's go.
I actually have all the tags too. I think.
Do you? Nice.
The Instagram handle. I have the Twitter handle. I have the YouTube, but people can make. There's not like exclusive names for YouTube.
Yeah.
But I have the SoundCloud. I have
all one word. I'm assuming. Pey.
All one word. Yeah.
That's good.
And then I have the Linktree. I don't know if there's more social media outside of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like my name, but I went through tons of phases of trying different things. I was thinking Opaque for a while because one of my middle names is Paqe, which is just like
one of his middle names. Pey's packing mad middle names.
Yeah, I'm at like it's Pey, Kole Packie, Lawrence Heath, and then my last name. And because they're talking about that, yeah, the story is like my parents had a very slim chance of having children. My mom had something going on with her health where it was like a miracle to have a baby. So when she had my eldest brother, she was like, we're just going to have to give him tons of names, right? So she gave him like 4 middle names, or 3 middle names, so that they could get enough names out there, right? And then my middle brother came along and they're like, fuck, we can't like give him less names, right? We got to give him like as many. And then I came along, third miracle baby, and they were like, okay, we're just going to go for it. Like they were running out of names at that point. So they were going to like my grandmother's maiden name and my great uncle on one side and like stuff like that. So that was kind of fun.
Very interesting. I never heard of that. Oh, you know what? It makes sense though. It makes total sense. They had to follow. They got stuck in the same format, so they had to follow it. They had to be like, we're not gonna only give him one name. I mean, what? He's gonna feel like he's not as good or something.
It's like how all YouTubers end up with really weird habits. Is like they're like, it was working before, so I'm just gonna stick with it.
That's a good segue.
You have siblings, right? How many siblings do you have?
I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. I'm the eldest of 4.
Ooh, I'm the youngest. Do you think that being the youngest or the oldest impacts personality?
I think a little bit. I think a lot of times what I've noticed is the oldest usually stays younger longer, so they're slower to figure out things and slower to grow up. I think I've noticed, but like the youngest is kind of forced into this model that's already kind of been set. There's actually a really good movie everyone should watch. It's an Irish movie, and they sing. Oh, I can't remember the name.
Sing Street.
Yes, Sing Street. Thank you, Raquel. Sing Street. Yeah,
I love Sing Street.
It's an amazing movie.
That movie. That's why I can do an Irish accent.
There you go. The ending is like a really like for
beautiful,
me it always hits home.
Story.
Yeah, like a brother story. Like he goes through and like explains like the oldest brother is like on the boat and he plows the waves for the younger brothers, which I thought was really cool. So I think I cry every time at the end of that movie, like ball my eyes out.
I love that movie, but I also really agree. Where like first of all, go watch Sing Street. I love that movie.
Very good movie.
But second of all, I think the eldest sibling always has to trailblaze. First of all, he gets the worst iteration of the parents, in my opinion, to a certain degree. Of parents, people learn as they experience, right? And they figure stuff out a little bit better. So like consistently, you'll see oldest siblings going like, I didn't get that luxury when I was younger, right? And I didn't get that.
For me, though, specifically, it's like I was the first, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so I got like a lot more attention. So like I was held longer, and I was doted on longer, and I was the first. So my aunt, has a special place because I was her first baby and all this. So there is a little bit of that as well. So I think it's a little bit of both. But I can see where you're coming from as well. It's like you look back and I couldn't go to someone's house until I was in like 8th grade. something like that, because my mom was just all worried about it. And but now like my sister, as like a 14-year-old, was like going to all these or like less than that, I mean, was doing all this stuff that I, so there is that. But I think that I think that there's also like it's also kind of a good thing. I don't know, it depends. I think it's a mixed bag, which is what Pey says all the time, which I'm starting to say. It's funny you pick up lingo. Mixed bag.
Yeah. You also, what is it? I say dope a lot.
Oh yeah.
And I say
dig. You dig it?
Yeah, I dig stuff.
You don't say it a lot. You said it a lot when we first met, but I don't think you really say it much anymore. Anyway.
Yeah, but no, I agree. I agree that's a mixed bag, like what you were saying, where there's definitely a degree of like, there's benefits and deficits being any child. I think if you had to objectively look at it, I think the youngest child has the most advantages, and I think the middle child gets it the worst to a certain degree, because they're stuck in this weird, like, I don't know, I think middle childs always have like a very like rough experience with their family to a certain degree. I think they're always like at a little bit of a disadvantage because they're not the baby and they weren't around initially and they didn't get like all of the trailblazing, but then they had the least time being the youngest, and it's very interesting. But
yeah, I agree.
I would, what's the magic number of kids? Like how many kids is like the magic? Do you like being one of 4, or do you think that less or more would be better?
So I think it depends on the family structure, but we were always really tight. We weren't like, we didn't have tons of money. So like at one point, all 4 of us were in one room on bunk beds. And I think that I liked that. I think the only problem with being raising in such like a big house like that, first of all, you get used to like being with people all the time. And I do consider myself like an introvert, but being around people like that my entire life has made me to where like if I'm ever like by myself, even as like an adult, if I'm ever home alone, I get like really freaked out, Like I definitely long to be close to people a lot, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's just my experience in a big family. I think that you definitely should not have single children though. That's my personal opinion.
Really?
Go ahead.
I disagree. So okay, I think that I agree in the fact that I think it's harder to have a single child. But that being said, you don't have to raise a single child like you would raise a family. So I see families, if you have like a single child and you're isolating your family a little bit, it's going to be really hard for them. But if you are consistently having close friends and family friends, and you have like people like siblings, like something like a brotherhood or like having a sister or something in that nature, that feeling doesn't have to be tied to blood. It helps when it is, but you can have close friends that you feel very close to that fill the same role. I mean, I actually had issues with having close friends because I was so close to my brothers. But
that's true. And that's a good point to make, because it's like family for us, especially my household, was always first. And so, and I still stand by that. But I think there's good things like that, but there's also like your friend making skills are kind of lackey, because you're like, I always got my homies, my brothers and my sister. Yeah. So I don't necessarily need to go out and find all these people. But when you move away, you're kind of on your own. We've talked about that, how I grew up with such a small class and I never really knew how to make friends. But so I got kind of hit in both aspects of that. Small class, also big family. So it's kind of, but whatever.
Yeah. I also grew up with not a lot of money, so we did a lot of sharing. One of my songs, I have a lyric where it's like, I never had a bed I called mine, so I often slept on the floor. I don't want people interpreting that as I didn't have a bed like available my entire childhood. It was more like we would like bebop around from room to room. We didn't have like clear. It was like a 3-bedroom house, and like the kids kind of had one room, and we had bunk beds for a while. But then we wouldn't have like designated beds, and it was very weird. And then my parents got divorced, which made it all complicated. But a lot of the times we would like, one of my favorite memories is like when we were kids. My eldest brother was really, really crucial in kind of taking care of us, especially when I was younger. He was great. I feel very close to him, and both my brothers actually. But we would do this thing he called powwows, and we just take like as many blankets as we could. There was this big hamper full of blankets, and we'd grab them all and we'd throw them on the floor in the living room. And we had this one TV that was like a VHS player and TV, and we'd put in like a movie like Little Giants or like That Darn Cat or any of the VHS Disney movies.
Yeah.
And we'd like be in this like big ball of blankets and pillows, and we'd sleep there, and it would be amazing. And with VHSs, whenever it would run out, it would rewind at the end, and then the screen would just stay blue. It wouldn't start playing again. So you'd wake up in the middle of the night to the blue screen, and you'd have to turn it off because we fell asleep to it. But yeah, I have good memories.
I think that stuff, you can't get that with a tight friend, because one of my close friends that was an only child had a friend like that, and they stayed at each other's houses all the time and stuff like that. So I think it is possible, but there's something about that
It's
Um,
harder. I think it's
yeah,
harder for sure. You just need to find substitutes, right? You need to find things that fill the same role for people. It also depends on how close you are with your parents. I think that some
yeah.
parents do a better job of like creating clear boundaries so that they can become more friends, right? These are the rules that we follow. I don't have to be the super, like, I always follow them, but then they're also not like the really lax, like, I'm your best friend kind of dad. They're
Mm-hmm.
people that like work together well. Like, my
Mm-hmm.
dad kind of fit that role. He especially fit that role in high school, but like before he was like kind of like an enforcer, like stricter.
That's kind of my dad was the same way, similar.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Oh,
he
quick. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
there was a
Yeah.
lot of transparency, which I think you also did with your parents. Like my parents knew when I was drinking in high
Yeah.
school and smoking. Like when I smoked weed for the first time, I told my dad. I was like very
Mm-hmm.
public, and it was because he created such an inviting situation to communicate. That was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had all sorts of unhealthy habits. Don't get me wrong. Like both of my parents have their flaws, but with my dad, he was like the best parent I could ever have had or wished for in high school, and he struggled a lot before that. But like in high school, like it was like he killed it because I was going through so much in high school. But what were you gonna say?
No, that's kind of how. Well, I was gonna say something else, but that's important to note. That's how my dad was as well, kind of in the enforcer, which is I think is very important as when you're a kid, and I think that's kind of hard to do. I think maybe it is easy to do, but imagine being like an enforcer to like a little kid. Like at least me, I'm more of like a soft person, so me trying to be like the enforcing like father figure, which I think is the norm, would be hard for me. But I think it's very important, and I think and then like as I grew older, he turned like my dad kind of turned into my friend, and where I think he might have overstepped his bounds in certain ways, and we became too close of friends to where like things were okay, like drinking was okay, almost like normalized, and then I got into that at like a really younger age, but that's still my. I mean, it's not his fault or anything. I'm
Well,
not
I think that
blaming
has
him.
less to
But
do with like being a father and it has more to do with habits as a person, right? If you don't see drinking as too dangerous as an individual, that will impact your children, right? And that's not necessarily like being a good or bad father. That has to do with like personal. And my
that's a
dad
good
is the
point.
exact
That's a good
same way
point.
with like with other things. And I've noticed a trend where like people when their parents are really like they do something, you tend to either take after them or hard rebel from it.
Yes, sir.
Right. So if you have like religious parents, you follow their footsteps or you hard rebel and you become anti-religious, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that's like really interesting to watch. I don't know. I mean, alcohol is tricky. This actually segues into something that we wanted to talk about. Like, what is safe drug use? What is substance abuse, and what isn't substance abuse? Because that's such a tricky thing.
I have a good. So my dad, my parents, I think they also say this, and hopefully I'm not overstepping by saying this, but they consider themselves to be what's the term? Not professional.
Like high functioning.
Yeah, high function alcoholics. There's a better way of putting it. I forget. Anyway, like they're great parents. They weren't like boozers all the time during the day,
Mm-hmm.
like chronic crazy boozers. But my dad said when I was a baby, and because I was the first one, my mom dropped out of school to raise me because that's something she felt very passionately about, and so my dad was kind of left on the vine going through chiropractic school,
Mm-hmm.
and
Your mom did not drop school. She
well, no,
graduated.
okay, she graduated, but she didn't pursue a career. Is what I mean. I'm sorry, she did not drop
Wait,
out of
what
school.
school did she?
She has her She has a major in biology. She has a
Yeah,
bachelor's.
that's important to clarify. So
Yeah,
she
my fault.
graduated, but
Yeah,
then
she
didn't pursue a
graduated.
career.
Yeah, she didn't work. Is what I meant.
Yeah.
My fault. My fault.
No.
But anyway, so he talks about sometimes that alcohol for him, especially during those times, kind of kept him from, I guess, suicide. He says kind of like
Right.
he says stuff like
Coping mechanism.
it kept him from completely going off the rails. But then it's hard to say, like, I wouldn't suggest anyone to do that, but I think for him, at least at the time, he felt like it was keeping him from going absolutely crazy.
Right.
And so
Well,
that's
the
just
thing
a
about
point to note. I'm curious what you think about that.
this thing about substances that people in our, especially when we were growing up with like dare not to do drugs, and like religious perspectives on things, it's absolutely a spectrum, right? Because I don't know if you've had any friends fall apart because of drugs, but I've had a couple who like their lives like went from good to like really bad, like very coke fiendy, very like messed up from taking too much ecstasy. It hurt their brain. They had to like change their habits. Some people didn't recover. Some people did. They're like, what I'm doing isn't smart. I gotta transition, right? But it's weird to see that because one of the main problems, and Jaden Animations actually has a great video about this,
Hmm.
where I see a lot of people talking about this, where you were told drugs are bad growing up, and then you suddenly are in an environment where you're with friends that you trust, friends that you think highly of, friends who you think are like smart, right? And then they pull out a drug. Sometimes it's marijuana, sometimes it's cocaine, sometimes it's alcohol. When you're underage, it can be a range of different drugs. It can be ecstasy or um, hallucinogenics, right? It could be LSD or. But what I'm getting at is someone will pull out a drug when you weren't expecting it, and they'll use it so casually, and they'll be fine, right? And they've been using it for a while, and it really challenges the idea that you were presented of drugs are bad, never do drugs, right? And it takes this very clear line and blurs it, right? Of like what is and isn't okay. And I don't think we acknowledge enough of the fact that it's a spectrum, right? And it's like that with alcohol. You can be abusing alcohol, but not an alcoholic. You can be in a position where your habits around using alcohol aren't healthy, but you're not an alcoholic. Where some people have a genetic disposition towards alcoholism, and you'd be surprised at how quickly it can get out of control for them. My grandfather being one of those people, which is why I have to think about this with my children. I feel like I handle addiction very, very well. I've drank a lot, and I've smoked a lot, and I've done other things, but I think generally speaking, I don't do much of that anymore. I do it in healthy amounts. I don't know. I just don't have a very addictive personality. But just because it was something I could handle and approach doesn't mean if I have biological children instead of adopting, that they won't have issues with. They might have a genetic disposition towards alcoholism, which is a much trickier thing to do. So, but it is a spectrum, right? It's slow, and then I have a song about it. It's something that you don't realize is dangerous until it is. That's why it's really important to consistently be checking in and holding yourself accountable beyond just like use. And I mean, I don't know, dude, America has some really, really, really bad habits surrounding drinking habits, especially with party culture, binge drinking from like it's illegal. And to a certain degree, it's like really frowned upon to drink. And then suddenly you're over 18, or maybe you're in high school, and suddenly it's expected that you're drinking and breaking the rules, but it's still illegal, right? And then suddenly you're drinking at a party for the first time with no one necessarily there in college, in first exposure to college, to really look out for you. And then you're being encouraged at dawn to drink, and then suddenly you're plastered, and you can put in these really uncomfortable, really unsafe situations because of our culture surrounding it, and we normalize it.
Well, anything, especially alcohol or any drug, or anything in the world,
any substance,
habitualness, meaning like if you always go out to be social and you're drinking every single time, or you get sad and you drink every single time, creating those habits is the number one avenue to become an addict, in my opinion. I've seen my friends, for example, be like get in a breakup and like go to drinking and not be checking themselves, because like people don't necessarily check themselves with these things. So, and then all of a sudden they turn into a point where they have to drink to go to sleep, or they have to drink to go outside, or they have to drink to go to a party, to socialize, which I struggled with for a little bit, where I felt like I couldn't go. I still do a little bit, where I feel like I can't go and be social without, drinking, which is not a good thing to do.
I have two close friends that have quit drinking at this point in their life, who feel extreme social anxiety and feel like they cannot socialize anymore because they relied on drinking as a way of socializing in these environments so heavily. And from my perspective, I think they're very skilled socially when they aren't drinking and when they are drinking, but it definitely alleviates that pressure and also creates this expectation of like, to be good at socializing and to feel comfortable, I have to drink. And that creates an even more problematic association with alcohol. And like you said, habitual. Well, I mean, so I think there's good habits and I think there's bad habits. And really, it depends on if you're doing something consistently will be good for you or bad for you. And obviously there's extremes, but like exercising is a general example of like people who are habitually exercising, that's good. You can take it too far, right? And it can become bad for your body or dangerous, right? Just like drinking, you can like if you're consistently drinking, that habit is bad, right? Because it's bad for your body, it hurts your brain. There's other things involved, right? And our bodies are made to handle abuse. We can handle some smoke in our lungs. We can handle some alcohol. But that being said, it adds up very quickly, especially when it becomes like habit, when you form habits around it. So I think that substance abuse needs to be taught as much less of a switch, right? You do cocaine once and you're a drug addict and blah 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 blah, because it makes so confusing when you're exposed, like I was in college, to people who are doing cocaine, very high functioning, and are your friends, and you have a lot of faith in and trust, right? And then some of those friends you end up seeing later develop a bad habit, right, and can't break it, and you're like, wow, I'm really glad that I did not get heavily into this drug. I'm seeing that a lot with ecstasy and MDMA, and I'm seeing that a lot with cocaine, right, as like a young adult. I'm seeing it a lot with marijuana, but I think the marijuana one comes from people who are like, this isn't as bad of a drug. I think marijuana is safer than alcohol. I think marijuana is like one of the safer things. Like I think I technically consider caffeine a drug too. It's just the least harmful. But besides caffeine, I think marijuana, generally speaking, was one of the least harmful drugs. So it's like much better to be a consistent smoker than it is to be a consistent drinker. That being said, I still think that because it falls into that category, people use it as an excuse to create bad habits surrounding it.
Well,
right? Just like you can with cigarettes.
I've said on potheads, like on the topic of potheads, I think that a lot of that is for sure developed based on like wake and bakers. We talked about this before, but people, I think marijuana is caffeine, of course, and people can abuse caffeine. Like those bangs. Have you ever had a bang before?
Yeah, one time.
They're
when
insane.
I was driving from Arizona, I was driving like 18 hours in a row, right? And it's crazy. It's crazy. But I bought Bang energy drinks because I was like, I'm gonna buy caffeine just in case I get tired. I want to be safe, which is a good idea in my opinion, right? So I was driving and it was getting late, and I was like, okay, now's the time to drink it. I didn't drink it on the entire drive to Arizona from Northern California. I was drinking on the way back, and I drank it and I was like, wow, this is like what I imagined cocaine feels like. This, I feel wired right now. Like I feel so high energy. I'm talking quickly. Like it was really, really intense. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And caffeine pills. I know my brother used to play collegiate ultimate frisbee, which is like a weird sport, but he was on a national team. So they went to nationals and like competed on like a really high level. And it was like growing in popularity. And they really, because you have these tournament days where you're playing for like 6 to 8 hours and you play 3 days in a row. So they were super dependent on caffeine pills, especially when you're waking up early to start playing. So it was really interesting to see that. And they were driving long distance for tournaments and stuff like that. So there's definitely a degree of like, you can abuse anything. You can abuse Tylenol, right? Or you can abuse ibuprofen.
Tums,
well, Tylenol is actually really bad.
Tums, you can abuse Tums. Yeah. Has anyone ever heard of this? Like people can get so or like, you know, because I was a nursing major, weird flex, but okay. But people can get so
nurses,
like their body gets so whatever, like all messed up because they're like chronically eating Tums, that if they don't eat Tums, they have the most insane heartburn like known to man. Yeah, and like it's really hard to come back from as well.
It's bad for your stomach too. The acids in your stomach really bad at because if you overuse it.
Right. So that's so even Tums, like you could, So I was just elaborating on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's a really, really good point. That's like the most vanilla medicine.
Yeah.
You know, as far as like, you know, when we think of like easygoing medicine, everything can be abused. I think it's about checking in. It's about monitoring. It's about not lying to yourself, right? Being critical and aware. And it's one of those things where it's like if you're questioning whether or not what you're doing is safe, right? Drinking too much can be dangerous, right? But mostly drinking is dangerous when you're doing it with things. Like if you're drinking a moderate amount, you'll mostly be safe. If you're not driving, if you're putting yourself in safe positions, right? If you're, monitoring yourself and have friends that can support you if things do go wrong, right? Generally speaking, you'll be okay. But drinking that moderate amount can become unhealthy when it's habit forming. There's a certain degree of like, it's hard to just like mess up one night when it comes to like alcoholism. You don't like drink once and become an alcoholic. You don't do a drug once and become, depending on the drug, because I kind of categorize drugs into this like tree, right?
Well, don't they do it also in the I guess the judicial system, like with the cops, like category 1, category 2.
Right.
Category
So that's extent, right, of how illegal the drug is, right?
Okay, but I guess it's different. Yeah.
So what I'm doing is same concept, but from more of like a social science perspective. So I see there's like 3 branches, in my opinion. Like there's 3 branches in the government. There's 3 branches of drugs, in my mind. And then there's tons of definitions people will have for these. Like there's uppers, right? And then there's like downers. That's like a classic thing you see. But in my mind, there's like stimulants, something, which is another thing people say for uppers. But in my mind, like I see caffeine and cocaine as kind of like two very extreme differences, but on the same path, right? There's like two big steps between caffeine and cocaine. But then there's also like marijuana, which I kind of call like a slipping drug, right? Where it's like it doesn't make you feel more grounded. Makes you feel like a little spacey and have a different perspective. And I think hallucinogenics fall into that. LSD, mushrooms, DMT, stuff like that fall into that category. And then I also think there's like grounding drugs, which I would call like alcohol and ecstasy, MDMA, like just amphetamines in general. I think meth falls into that category. And I think like heroin would fall into the kind of slipping category, or maybe into this grounding category too. But I think that they're kind of like different levels of like a similar thing, and they're not exactly comparable. But I think that it's like very interesting to look at it that way, because I think like it helps you understand when people are comfortable in these scenarios, when they can do them, and how they are going to abuse them, right? But I don't know, drugs are very tricky, and I think there's a lot of scare tactics going into our definition of drugs and how we understand drugs growing up in the United States.
I thought they've changed, because I know the dare was big when we were kids, like where they brought in, the only thing I remember was for cigarettes, and they brought in like those weird mouths, like with the tongues being like all gross and stuff. You remember those? But other than that, I feel like they've changed that. I could have sworn they threw the dare project out, or dare program out.
I think it's dying. I think it's still around, but it's not nearly as big. I mean,
Yeah, I guess it's
we
probably
still
still
see
around.
that. We still see that where parents feel the need to be extreme, and people also feel like very self-conscious to share about their experiences because it can affect employment and other things. But we're seeing social changes surrounding that. It's all tricky.
I
just think it's
I always lean towards transparency. I think there's
Yeah.
never a time where you shouldn't be transparent about most things, unless it's something. I mean, like Pei was saying, I mentioned that, and he was like, "Yeah, but some people use that to be like an asshole." And at that
Yeah.
point, I agree, which kind of opened my eyes a little bit, because I try to be a very transparent person, but sometimes I use that as a crutch to be an asshole, and that's not fair.
This applies specifically to being transparent with others about them, right? So in this case, like
Right.
when I was talking about
Right.
transparency, I was like talking about you yourself, your experiences, your background,
mhm.
right? I don't think you should meet someone and go like, okay, here's all of me, right? Here's all of my baggage. Here's all of my hardships. There's a certain degree of you should monitor the flow of the water of expression, right? But then in your case, what you're talking about, which is also super, super interesting and really fun, is transparency with others of how they make you feel, how you feel about what they're doing and stuff like that. And I agree, transparency and honesty is really, really important. But also, yeah, people can use it to be assholes. People can use it to justify being mean. We've all heard that person go like I'm not mean. I'm just honest. And you're like, no,
I'm
you're
just
also
real.
very, very mean. Yeah, or I'm real. Yeah.
No,
But
yeah,
I just wanted to clarify.
Um,
You can continue what you were saying about how you sometimes you use. it
Oh, I
as a
know. I
justification
think
sometimes.
I think transparency, even in like drugs, for example, like when you're teaching drugs, being transparent and saying that not everyone is going to be a crazy addict the first time they do it, and so like in preparing people for those social situations, like what you're saying, I think that's very important. And I think that all goes back to being transparent in your teachings, and being transparent
Right.
in everything.
Right.
Especially for younger, impressionable people, because then you set these people up for not being prepared.
To finish kind of my perspective on drugs to a certain degree, just for people trying to figure stuff out, I think there's like drugs that should not be done. I think methamphetamines, specifically like crystal meth, what we call crystal meth, shouldn't be done. I think heroin should not be done. I think painkillers, which are essentially morphine, is essentially heroin. So you got to be really, really careful with prescribed painkillers. I think that the legalization of marijuana, specifically medicinal marijuana, has been very, very, very good for the opioid crisis in the United States. I had someone close to me just have an issue where she got addicted to opioids because of prescription drugs.
That's how a
and
lot of
then
people are.
Like really, really messed up her life.
Yeah.
And so I think be really, really, really careful with opioids. Stay away from methamphetamines. Understand that ecstasy and MDMA are a type of amphetamine, which means they're in the same family, right? So those
Adderall.
are very risky. There's this huge rule: do not take do not take MDMA more than once every 3 months. It will cause lasting damage to your brain. I'd say mostly stay away from it, generally speaking, especially any sort of habit forming. Like if you're taking it often, it's very, very, very dangerous. Cocaine is like that too. A lot of people do cocaine and are fine, and a lot of people don't talk about it. But it can be really, really dangerous. It is a drug that feeds into doing more of it. I think marijuana and alcohol can be dangerous, but are mostly okay. I think hallucinogenics are very, very interesting, but you need to make sure that you're in a safe environment with people that make you feel safe to where you can't hurt yourself. Because the drug itself, in my opinion, LSD and mushrooms are not intrinsically dangerous, but there is a certain lack of control you have of circumstance. You're definitely interpreting things from a different lens. So just make sure you're being safe and make sure you're in a good environment. But a lot of people do these drugs and are okay, and there's a lot of misinformation that's spread about how dangerous or safe they are, right? You don't need to look at it as one or the other. It can be somewhere in between.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Also, don't do whippets.
Oh yeah.
Don't do whippets. Whippets
Or
are
Adderall,
really, really
guys.
dangerous.
Adderall. Anything that's habit forming. That's what I said.
Adderall
Like
is
if
an
you
amphetamine.
right, exactly. If you're doing Adderall every time you're studying, you know, like that can create some crazy stuff going on. It's not good.
Well, it's funny that the medicine, and I'm not saying this medicine can't be helpful for people with ADHD, but it's kind of funny that the way they treat ADHD is baby meth, right? It's like a lesser form of meth.
That's a whole different thing.
which
Like,
is-
so like for a quick like a story from what I've experienced. So I had a tooth. It's all fucked. I'm not gonna show you my teeth because I'm embarrassed by them. But I had a tooth that didn't come up all the way, and so they had to like cut my gums and like put this weird thing to like pull it out. And they prescribed me Loratabs. And my parents have always been very.
Loratabs is.
It's a downer. It's like a painkiller.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's extreme. You ever heard of Loratabs before?
Mm-mm, but
Percocets? Ever heard of Percocets?
I know Percocet. Yeah.
I think they're similar. Anyway, I got prescribed those, and like it hurt. Don't get me wrong; it did not feel good. But like I didn't need to take anything but like one Tylenol. I think once. So I think people are scared of pain, and also people are like doctors are overprescribing. Not a lot of times. Like they're giving you way too much for what you need based on the whole big pharma thing, and like they get money the more they prescribe, stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of malicious intent behind the way that they prescribe medicine in this day and age.
Well, I think the way they're pushed to prescribe medicine may be a better way of putting it.
And that could be it too.
Sense.
Maybe it's probably not an evil doctor like, you take this.
Well,
but
because
like
the doctors aren't necessarily benefiting from overprescribing. But if they're set up in a standard where big pharma sets up this is how much you should be, like pharmaceutical companies saying this is how much patients need to be taking, doctors kind of have to take them at hand to a certain degree. So there's this weird mix of doctors can absolutely be overprescribing. I just don't think it's necessarily malicious intent. Whereas I'm very, very critical of pharmaceutical companies and the way they handle stuff. I think that they are acting with extreme neglect, and they are not respecting the impact they're having on Americans and the cost of what's involved. Like there's a lot of really, really, really shit people doing that. But yeah, like you said, overprescription is a thing.
Sensitivities. So like people who have chronic conditions will gain this sensitivity. And so I think that's when prescription should be based on like a scale of how often you've taken these medications before, and maybe like corrected. I don't know the perfect way to do it, but I've seen people in the hospital that have had chronic pain, chronic whatever
way to do it. Yeah.
And they're and they need to take more, and they're crying in pain because they have these crazy tolerances, and they're we pump them full of stuff like the maximum that you can even pump into someone, and they're still complaining of pain. And there's also some malicious intent even behind, maybe not malicious intent, but some people are also, like ex-addicts or something. And so they're like, give me more, even though maybe they're not feeling like in pain. They want to like get something out of it. So there's also that. It's just tricky. And I don't know the solution, but I think it should be reevaluated.
That's an argument I hear a lot of Western versus Eastern medicine for people that kind of like want to approach things in a not necessarily non-scientific way. Like I have huge qualms with homeopathy. And
because you had personal experiences with that, right?
Yeah.
You want to get into that? You don't have to.
I mean, I will at some point, but right now I kind of want to talk about this point of like, there's this argument of like, medicine should not be covering up a wound. It should be healing the wound, right? Like to a certain degree, sometimes you have to manage the wound. Sometimes you just need to make it more manageable. But there is certain tendencies in Western medicine at times, and I'm actually a huge advocate of Western medicine, but I think this is a fair criticism of Western medicine, that at times it's not solving the issue, it's bandaging the issue.
Management is the perfect way of saying it, because it's literally called pain management in the hospital. When you're prescribing pain meds, it's all about pain management. So you go in and you ask, how much pain are you feeling? Exactly. They give you a scale, and I mean you could do like social cues, like you can tell if someone's in pain based on like a grimace, and there's like this whole scale. Anyway, so it's not perfect. That's the thing with the whole pain management thing, is all based on the client. It's all based on the patient, which is, like I said, I don't know.
Diagnosis is hard. Yeah.
I don't know like the perfect way to fix it, but I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong when.
Yeah.
And some people have a different pain tolerance, or some people are just scared. I think a lot of times people are scared of pain, and so they're like, well, give me all this stuff because what if I need it, you know? And as soon as they get a small inkling of pain, they're like, uh-oh, I got to take this. As like because, you know, another thing with pain medicine is that it takes a second to kick in, you know? And so when people start feeling something come on, they're so scared of what it could be that they pop a pill and then they go way towards the other way versus being in that managing healthy level, which is.
That's also something with drugs too. Always underdo. You can always take it again, right? You can not that night. You can always come back another night with a better understanding. But so many drugs have delayed effects. I know so many people that are smoking, they feel fine, and then they smoke more, and then they start to get really hit by it. Edibles is like super, super famous example of delayed hits and people over taking like how many milligram edibles they eat and then smoking as well. Always aim under, right? And slowly, incrementally expand your understanding of what you can handle, because for everyone it's different. I know people that can drink shot after shot after shot and be okay, right? And hold their own. And I know people that take 2 shots and they're like plastered. And it's not something, I know we glorify drinking a lot in our culture, and I've totally played into that too myself, but it's not something to be ashamed of, and it's something to be supported in.
And to be just educated and understanding and looking forward is very important. It's hard to do, especially as a kid, like an 18-year-old kid. But looking forward, my suggestion, at least from experience, is to look forward and think about what you're doing a little more than you think, you know? I don't know. Kind of hard to put.
Be aware of like your future and how it's going to impact stuff, and like
when you're habitual, like we talked about earlier, like make sure you're not forming any habits or trying not to. But form also good habits, like exercise every day, which I'm not good at either.
Having someone to give, that would be cool. Having someone tell me about it, dude. I started exercising like a week and a half ago, and then I stopped exercising about 3 days ago, and it's like, I need to get back to doing that. But also, having a sobering person who can give honest perspectives in a way that will not attack you, or where it's like they can be honest about whether or not they think what you're doing is problematic without necessarily making you feel alienated for it.
The problem is if people don't have a good support system, and like their one friend is also struggling with something like that, and like they think it's fine, then they can really skew. You know, like for kids, for example, your perspective could be very skewed based on someone that you trust wholeheartedly, but they could also be struggling with the same thing. So it's a little sketchy.
Right. That's one of the things about like being exposed to friends doing hard drugs and substances is there's this weird mental game you play of like, well, they're okay, right? And I was told that everyone's going to be horrible. And then 4 years later, 25% of them aren't okay, right? And just like, I didn't get that at the time. It seemed like everyone was okay. And then, 25% of them slipped into really problematic habits. And yeah. How long have we been?
An hour and 1 minute.
Okay. I think we should talk a little bit more and then try to finish it up. And I think that'll be good.
Sure.
Something I want to talk about that we have in our little notes right here is fan love, right? I think that's a cool way of you put that, fan love, which is I think it's kind of. I think what you were going for, you were going for like you wanted people who have been supporting us to feel appreciated.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it might be cool to potentially like pull up comments, right, and put them in the video of things that like stood out to us. And right now we don't have like a lot of comments, so it's a little bit harder to do. So we'll roll with what we got. But this would be a cool point to like pull up a couple comments where.
Well, we should read them and react to them live. I think that would be cool.
Oh, that'd be good too. Yeah.
Let's just go back on the Well, here I'll look as well.
And what video do we want to do right now? Do we want to do our videos or the podcast videos?
Well, I already talked about that one comment. The one that you talked about my sound design in my video. I'm trying to think of any more impactful comments that we've had recently.
Right. Well, I have had in my videos that I released, I just released a reaction video, and I'm gonna scroll through really quick and just try to find some that stand out to me the most. Here's one that I thought was really funny. Someone says, I'm listening to an in-depth discussion of an obscure reference to a small merch company from a behind-the-scenes video for a reaction video to a reaction video to a fan rendition of a fan song about a React series. It also has 34 views. What? Why? Also, song's fire.
That was very interesting. I saw that same comment. I was
Totally.
like, wow. It's a
I
good
like
point
that
though.
one.
It's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, and I thought the vibes were lacking until the end. Like I was like, like I got concerned. They was like, by the way, song's fire. I was
I
like,
like
all right, cool.
honesty.
Yeah.
No,
No,
I
yeah,
like
yeah. I
it.
think it's cool.
They're
Yeah.
just being candid. I dig it. I mean, I think there's a difference between like well thought out criticism and just like this is stupid. Oh, here's Fighting Link. He's great. I appreciate the behind the scenes. It's nice to look at the process. I like that comment. That makes me feel good. He's a cool dude. There's a lot of cool people. Harry B. I like the behind the scenes, but I couldn't decide which faces to focus on the whole video. Watch later in the video. I would, in fact, like to see Kole and Pey, but any content you make is fun to watch, so just keep what you're doing. It's really wholesome, dude. Oh, do you know what was one of my favorite comments of like all time? I released a video called "Look at this stick figure. His name is Joe." The entire premise being it starts off by making fun of a guy who walks slow with a group of friends and blocks the entire sidewalk, which is especially prevalent in college towns. And then Anne knows how to walk slow but leave space for people to pass and stuff like that. And then immediately the first couple comments in the video were things like let me find them really quick. Triple Link said, "For too long has society told us how fast to walk. No more. Be like Joe." Right? And then someone else said, "Remember, kids, don't be like Joe. Don't block the sidewalk. By the way," oh, this is Michael Sear. "By the way, I can't believe you're about to hit 700 subs." Right? And then there was another one, "Be like Ann. That's the plan," from Harry B. And then I saw these people like debating it, right? And I thought it was really funny. So I wrote out this really long thing. This video is going to spark some controversial debate. Are you like Joe or an Ann? Are you a Joe or an Ann? Joe refused to let exaggerated social norms dictate the way he lives his life. Joe would much rather live isolated in the woods and mountains than be criticized for something that doesn't actually cause anyone harm. But Anne conforms to social norms, allowing for those who walk at a different pace not to be restricted by her preferences. Is society just a hive mind of criticism and blame, always pushing those who refuse to conform to the gutters? Or is it a blanket that allows people to evolve past their primal origins? This question keeps me up at night when I'm drinking my juice box and eating tasty microwavable burritos. To
Wait,
which
did you write that?
I wrote that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then to which Nathan Furman responded, "Civilization allows humans to evolve past their primitive origins. Culture allows people to understand how to better themselves and expand. Society puts restrictions on people to make sure everyone has a chance to grow. Running away to the mountains removes any man-made limitations such as social norms and laws. But this is also detrimental to your potential to do anything since it helps remove any help. In conclusion, Joe is a pussy and needs to fight against society instead of running away from it." Which I love. I love that comment so much. Because he followed the exact same thing of like over-analysis, academic analysis to like a silly ending.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you
quickly,
want?
yeah, quickly, for me, just Duke Potato. I mentioned this earlier, but shout out Duke Potato.
Here, pull it up.
He said, "I'm glad there's more light music in the background of these. Music has low-key has a huge impact on the reception of videos, as it really sets the tone to transform someone's story into a journey," which I thought was really cool. And like I mentioned earlier, I've already talked about this, but shout out Duke Potato. And then he goes on. By the way, he mentioned the VR.
Keep going.
Okay. He said,
yeah.
Then he said, so when I saw this, I was not expecting it. I was like, what the heck? This man like, out here giving sick advice, but writing books out here, which I would always prefer this comment, even if it's negative, than even like a "that's badass" comment, which is right below it. I mean, whatever. It's okay. I still like it.
Any comments, nice.
Yeah, I love all of you. I'm just saying this was interesting to see.
This was dope,
he goes, a lot of other storytime type channels, like the VR ones, which I mentioned earlier, do this to alleviate some of the awkwardness of just hearing someone talk or do something. A large part of Ludwig's success has been derived from using certain music to set the tone of a portion of his stream and how he's able to talk over it. End quotes. If he tried pulling off some of the speeches / monologues without any background music, the vibe would be pretty different overall. It also probably helps viewer retention, as the occasional pauses will feel more seamless. And then he comments again, "This is all just speculation, but just trying to think of anything that can give this channel the growth it deserves. Your edits are fantastic, and I really hope we get to see more of this in the future." Which is really, it's just a good comment. Just a good wholesome.
It's such a good chain
feedback.
Of comments too.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well thought out. Awesome job.
So yeah, shout out Duke Potato. I was gonna say something. But yeah, I think that's really cool. Also, I like all the Pep ADs, Storytime Pep ADs. I appreciate the Pep ADs.
That makes me happy too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the main one.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I imagine very few of you got through the whole thing, but no matter how much you watched, we appreciate you. Once again, leave any comments or questions that you have in the comment section below, and we'll check them out. We read all the comments. Thanks. Peace.
Later.
Undertow.